to have verbal confirmation when we are live.
Yes, we're live.
So, welcome to this meeting of the Employment Panel. This is the first council meeting we've had since the COVID, our ability to have COVID limited meetings has taken place. So this is a bit of a dry run. It's not a welcome departure as far as we're concerned, and I hope that members of the public won't think they're free to go out and do whatever they like. We're trying to keep a tab on this this virus, and we've done very well so far, and we wish to continue that way. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making an official recording. The recording forms part of the public record of the meeting and will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record our public meetings, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. To ensure the recording quality is maintained, please keep background noise to a minimum and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Thank you. I will now formally open the meeting. First item is apologies for absence. I think everybody is here, so no apologies. Item 2, named substitutes, that doesn't apply because we've got everybody here. Third item is declarations of interest. Do any members have declarations to declare? I see none, thank you. Next item, number 4, to approve and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of January. Only matters of accuracy need to be discussed. No matters of accuracy have been notified, so I will ask the panel members to confirm that they agree the minutes. Are all members in favour? Thank you. Unanimous. That meeting was, of course, to approve the appointment of our new Chief Executive, who joined the meeting last week. All welcome to this meeting, this unusual place. It's rather grand, I think, compared to our committee meetings at the Shire Hall. Questions from members of the public? None have been received. And item 6 is questions from councillors, and none have been received either. So going to item 7, which is the substantive part of the meeting, to discuss the appointment of an acting director, adults and communities. The purpose of this is to agree the appointment arrangements for an interim director for adults and communities following the resignation of the current post holder, Stephen Vickers. I will ask the Assistant Director People to introduce this subject.
As members will know, the current Director for Adults and Communities leaves the Council at the start of July. Statutory post, and we intend to fill the post on a permanent basis once the Chief Executive has had an opportunity to look at the management structure overall. In the meantime, we are proposing to make a temporary appointment for approximately 6 months. There are 2 options we've got to fill this post on a temporary basis. The first option is that we could recruit a candidate internally, or secondly, we could go to the external interim market. Our proposal that we've put in front of you today is that we run an open selection process internally, inviting a candidate to act up, and only then, if we fail to recruit internally, would we seek to go to the interim market. There is a quirk in the Council's constitution, which means that an appointment for an internal member of staff is delegated to an employment panel, but an appointment from the interim market is delegated to the Chief Executive. We are therefore proposing, for consistency purposes, that today an employment panel delegate the internal selection process to the Chief Executive. If delegated, the Chief Executive will run an open and transparent internal process and will work with the Cabinet member at all stages. Thank you.
Okay, so just for clarity, a little bit, if I may, there's mention of if an internal candidate is point 9 of the report. If an internal candidate is appointed and subject to no valid objections from cabinet members within the specified time period. So does that mean that the cabinet members will be involved in that? And point of detail, that means that members of this panel will not specifically be involved in that capacity. It will be just cabinet members.
Indeed, so that's the proper officer process, which is set out in the council's constitution, which says that for certain posts, cabinet members have an opportunity to present any valid objection to the appointment, whether it's permanent or temporary. Excuse me. This is one of those posts. So all cabinet members, and it is only cabinet members, would be invited to object before Paul was able to make, sorry, apologies, the chief executive was able to make any appointment. Does that answer your question, Leader?
Thank you. Paul, do you want to comment generally?
And thank you for that. I think this is an opportunity we have in terms of encouraging any of our internal candidates to come forward and put themselves forward for this interim role. It allows us to move quite quickly and fill the vacancy. And at the same time, and in tandem with that, you know, for me to complete my work regarding the wider review of the senior management structure and what the shape of that looks like to take us forward for the immediate future. So I think for me, it gives the organisation that win-win scenario where we can reach out, give an internal candidate the opportunity to work with us as part of an interim director, at the same time complete a review of the senior management. Those proposals I'll share informally and then bring back formally for approval in line with the proper processes. But it does allow us to move quickly and engage and get a replacement in post to cover what is a statutory role and undertake those duties and form part of the management team.
Any questions from members? Yeah, Councillor Harley.
Yes, thank you. I realise that this is for a director position, but we have had the unfortunate situation in the recent past where people have been appointed to interim positions below the director level, and that calling for people to apply for those interim positions has been taken as a competitive process, which has meant that they have subsequently been appointed into permanent positions without actually running an open recruitment process for those quite senior roles. I'd just like assurance that if we're having an interim from within the staff body this time, that we are going to go through a full external open recruitment process for this position, because it not only, that previous practice not only concerned members of cabinet and councillors, but also concerned a number of our own members of staff who felt that they were denied the opportunity to apply for those positions when when the interim posting came to an end.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, just to reply, Councillor Harvey, this is just delegated authority to make an interim appointment. Any plans for a substantive appointment would come back to this committee. Okay,
that's great. But for the record, I'd certainly like to be reassured. I believe that assurance was given previously, but I'd like to be reassured, because this is a public meeting, that for positions below director level, we will run proper competition for those more senior posts, and we're not just going to appoint interims without any further consideration.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I can give that assurance.
Yeah, we can give that assurance.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I see no problem with this. I would, though, say that what happens if you do internal interviews and you feel that perhaps a applicant is only just good enough and you would not be making that, but if in open they were not good enough to be shortlisted for that matter, or to you would look to something a little better than that, would you go to consultancy in order to make an interim appointment for that then?
Yeah,
And you wouldn't need to come back to this particular group in order to move from an interim internal
no,
appointment to an external consultants.
I think to be fair, the way that Tracy laid out the recommendations, it's almost in a sequential order. As we will go for an open and transparent process internally in the first instance. If there's no suitable candidate, who can deliver on meet the criteria that's required, and it's a statutory post, so that can't be in doubt. It's got to be met. Then the second step would be go to the market and secure an interim arrangement for that period. But in all of that, I've been working with the portfolio here, portfolio holders side by side in terms of the interview process and those decisions going forward.
Well, I'm happy.
Can I ask about the costing? So there's a financial section, resource implications, revenue budget. I don't know whether if we appointed interim, are they paid? If we go to the market and get someone on a contract for services, do we actually end up paying more than the usual rate?
Yeah, so the costings based out for an internal appointment. If we went to the external market, we would expect it to cost us considerably more.
So is that necessary in the report to mention that, or does it kind of delegated authority for that?
Well, apologies. So this report is concerning largely the appointment of an interim from the existing workforce, and that is the cost of what it would cost us if we appointed internally. I haven't included the detail of what an interim would cost because that's delegated to the Chief Executive.
Thank you. Thank you.
For information, I think it would be helpful for completeness for that sort of information to be included, even though it's not part of our responsibility, because I think it's useful for the public to understand quite what the difference in cost is of going to the market for an external interim appointment.
Yeah, it's good.
And I suppose something I'm sort of holding a little bit. So we end up appointing an internal candidate, and we then go to a panel. We go to externally, and that internal candidate doesn't end up getting the job. They've been built up. They think they've got. We could lose them. A very good. How do you manage that situation to manage their expectations and make sure we keep good people who are at the right level at the moment?
And I think, if I may, Tracy, we'll come in and follow this up. I would like to think there will be an internal candidate that we have. To be fair, the existing director of adults and community services has developed a strong team. It's a committed director that it has there. So I'd like to think there'll be a candidate come forward. The process will determine that. If there is, then we will look to develop that individual during that 6-month period. It's not just a holding position, it's taking on the role. So if there is some short-term personal or professional development, let's support that. Engage them in the work of the management board, engage them in the work of cabinet, working across the council. So they have every opportunity to further develop their skills and learning during that period, which would put them in a strong position going forward. But then that's the next stage, isn't it? That's the next stage. And this is all about the principle of investing in our staff and giving the best opportunity.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Okay, so the recommendation is that employment panel support the plan to make a temporary appointment to the role of Director for Adults and Communities. B, employment panel delegate the recruitment of a temporary Director for Adults and Communities to the Chief Executive. And thirdly, If a suitable internal candidate cannot be found, employment panel supports the chief executive's plan to recruit a suitable qualified external interim on a contract for services basis. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Just a couple of items of sort of any other business. Just to mention, the issue of non-disclosure agreements is an interesting one. I think it's probably something we'd like to know a little bit more about in the future. So maybe cabinet might come through cabinet as a report on the status with those. Second thing is more into the detail of appraisals and that kind of thing. So we'd be interested to know what sort of 360-degree appraisals might take place in the council. Again, I think if that could come to cabinet very shortly. Or we're going to do not an appraisal. We're going to do a job description and set some objectives for you. I don't know what the process is for that. Tracy, do you want to explain?
Yes, I can work with you on this, leader. So we've got a process set out in the Constitution, which means that you will hold the chief executive's appraisal on an annual basis. We have that discussion facilitated externally by West Midlands employers. You will consult with group leaders about those objectives and the chief executive's performance. And then, subject to the chief executive's agreement, you will report back to council at some point to inform council what those objectives are.
And so the timescale, basically, it's a little bit difficult to set objectives for quite yet. I think once it's been in place a little while, we'll know quite clearly what they should be.
We'll certainly want to get them set within the first 3 months. So this is the job that we need to look at next, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you very much. And the final point was just on the living wage. We agreed to have a look at that. And I think you mentioned that needs to perhaps fit into the budget cycle for next year because it could have cost implications. So again, you'll come with a paper and recommendation to cabinet about that.
I'm taking advice from the monitoring officer about the correct governance route to go through. But yes, we'll come up with a timetable and make sure it fits in with the budget cycle.
Councillor Chance, deal with the 3 you mentioned to me.
Yes, thank you.
Right. Well,
Is it appropriate for this meeting to kind of note our thanks to the interims who stood in prior to the appointment of Paul?
That's very good. Yeah.
So can we minute our thanks to Claire and Andrew for standing in as Deputy Chief Executives?
Yeah. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah.
I mean, through you, Chair, I think if we draft a letter on your behalf, formally thanking both Claire and Andrew for the work they've done over the last few months.
Thank you, Councillor Chance. Okay. So I'll bring the meeting to an end. Thank you very much for anybody who's attended. The next meeting will be the council meeting week on Friday. So hopefully we'll see some people there.
Thank you. We've got a venue for that, Chair. So for the next council meeting, is that